Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The morning of my cousin Rachel's wedding, I did everything right. I took my medication at 6:15 with a full glass of water, the way Dr. Hayes had told me to. I rested for 40 minutes before getting dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed while my roommate Priya helped me with the zipper on my blue dress because my fingers wouldn't cooperate that morning. I brought my collapsible cane, the slim one I kept in my bag for bad days, and I didn't tell anyone I'd been awake since 3 a.m. with the burning sensation moving up my left leg, the one that felt like someone was pressing a lit cigarette into my calf from the inside. I did all of this because I wanted to be there for Rachel. She was the one cousin in my family who called me on ordinary Tuesdays, who had driven 2 hours to sit with me during my second round of diagnostic testing 3 years ago, who had never once said what everyone else said. I wanted to dance at her wedding. That's the part one keep coming back to even now. Not the collapse. Not what my father said. Not what Dr. Hayes said afterward, though that changed everything. I keep coming back to how much I wanted to be the version of myself that danced. My name is Claire Maddox. I'm 39 years old. I'm a medical records compliance officer for a regional hospital network, which means I spend my days reviewing documentation for accuracy, cross-referencing diagnostic codes, ensuring patient files meet federal and state standards. I'm good at my job. My supervisor, Dina Okafor, has called me methodical to the point of brilliance, which I've always taken as both a compliment and a gentle warning about my personality. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia at 31, after 2 years of tests that ruled out everything else. Lupus, negative. Rheumatoid arthritis, negative. MS, negative. Lyme, negative. The list of things I did not have was long and, in a strange way, exhausting because each negative result meant another month of being told they just hadn't found it yet, that I should be relieved, that plenty of people lived with unexplained pain and managed fine. What I had was a nervous system that had decided to amplify every signal it received. Touch that would feel neutral to another person registered as pressure on mine. Cold registered as burning. Fatigue wasn't tiredness. It was the sensation of moving through water while wearing clothes made of concrete. On bad days, the pain had no location. It was everywhere and in everything, including the air. Dr. William Hayes had been treating me for 6 years. He was the chief of staff at Memorial Regional, but he also maintained a small patient roster of complex cases. People whose files required the kind of careful, longitudinal attention that most practices couldn't sustain. He'd taken me on after my third specialist referral, when I arrived in his office with a binder I'd assembled myself. Every test, every negative result, every symptom log I'd kept in a spreadsheet for 14 months. He'd read the entire binder while I sat across from him. Then he'd looked up and said, "You've been doing my job for me. Let's talk about what we know for certain." That was 6 years ago. We'd built a treatment plan together. Medication, pacing, sleep hygiene, a graduated activity protocol that I followed with the same precision I brought to compliance work. I had bad weeks and better weeks. I had learned slowly that the goal was not recovery in the way people meant when they said that word to me. The goal was management, sustainability, a life that fit inside the boundaries of what my body could actually do. My family had a different framework entirely. My father, Gerald Maddox, is a man who built his life on the belief that willpower is the only variable that separates people who succeed from people who don't. He grew up working in his father's hardware store, put himself through community college and then through a state university business program, and retired at 62 as a regional manager for a manufacturing company. He is genuinely proud of this. He should be. What he cannot do, what he has never been able to do, is accept that his template does not apply universally. When I first got sick before the diagnosis, he told me I was working too hard and needed better sleep habits. After the diagnosis, he transitioned seamlessly to a position that I've since recognized in a lot of family members of fibromyalgia patients. He decided the diagnosis itself was the problem, not the disease. The label. His theory was that doctors gave people like me a name for their laziness, and once you had the name, you used it as an excuse to stop trying. He never said this cruelly at first. It came as advice. You just need to push through, Claire Bear. The more you rest, the more your body thinks it needs to. Your grandmother worked through pain every day of her life and never complained. The affectionate nickname, Claire Bear from childhood, stapled to advice that told me I was choosing this. For years I tried to explain. I brought research. I brought the summaries Dr. Hayes had written specifically for moments like this, documents laying out the neurological basis of the condition in plain language. My father read them and said, "The medical industry makes money off people believing they're sick." My mother, Donna, is softer, but she follows my father's lead in most things, which in practice meant she occasionally squeezed my hand and told me she believed me, and then in the same breath asked whether I'd tried yoga. My Aunt Linda is my father's sister, 8 years younger, and she has decided over the years that my illness is a personality flaw reflecting poorly on the Maddox family character. She has 4 children, all healthy, all employed, all apparently immune to any form of physical frailty. She mentions this more than she realizes. There are others. Cousins who exchanged glances. An uncle who once said at Easter that he'd read online that fibromyalgia wasn't real. I've learned to arrive at family events with a certain kind of armor. Not anger, but a quiet decision to protect myself by needing nothing from them, expecting nothing, giving only what I could genuinely afford. That was the framework I arrived with at Rachel's wedding. The venue was a renovated estate about 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place with gardens and a white tent and small round tables covered in ivory linen. I arrived with Priya, who had insisted on driving. We found our seats in the 3rd row and I noted the path from my chair to the aisle, to the bathroom, to the exit, a habit I'd developed not from anxiety but from practicality. Managing a chronic pain condition means knowing your exits. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel cried at the altar in the specific way of people who have spent months trying not to cry and then simply give up all at once. Her new husband, Marcus, looked at her the way I hoped someone would look at me someday, with the particular attention of a person who sees exactly who you are. I cried a little. Priya handed me a tissue and whispered that we were both disasters, which made me laugh. The reception was where it started to go wrong. It started with the dancing. The band had been playing for about 30 minutes when Aunt Linda appeared at our table. "Claire," she said in the bright, pointed tone she used when she was about to say something that required witnesses. "Why are you just sitting there? Everyone's dancing." "I'm watching," I said. "I'm enjoying it." "Rachel wants everyone on the floor." "Then Rachel can come ask me herself." Aunt Linda's eyes narrowed slightly. She moved away. Priya, who had met Aunt Linda twice and disliked her thoroughly on both occasions, said quietly, "Do you want to leave?" "Not yet," I said. "Give me a little longer." My father appeared 20 minutes later. He didn't sit down. He stood at the edge of the table with a glass of bourbon and looked at me with the expression I'd come to recognize over the years. Not cruelty exactly, but a kind of resolute disappointment. The face of a man who has decided you are less than you could be and wants you to know he hasn't forgotten. "There is nothing wrong with you," he said. Not quietly. Not as a private comment. He said it the way people say things they want others to hear. "Get up and dance like everyone else." Aunt Linda was right behind him. She nodded. Always the victim. Priya stiffened beside me. I put my hand on her arm. The table next to ours had gone quiet. A few people were looking. I felt it, the particular social weight of being displayed, being made an example of, the way public accusation creates a gravity that pulls witnesses in whether they want to be part of it or not. Here is what I know medically and practically. Stress and emotional distress are significant fibromyalgia triggers. The body doesn't distinguish between physical threat and social threat. My nervous system, already amplified, treats both as danger. The adrenaline spikes, the muscles contract, the pain pathways fire faster and louder. I knew all of this. I still stood up. I don't entirely know why. Some combination of wanting to prove them wrong or wanting it to be over or simply being tired, so profoundly tired after years of this, of sitting quietly while my father told a room full of people that my illness was a performance. I stood. I took one step, then another, then a third. And then the floor moved. That's how it feels when it happens, not like falling but like the ground becoming unreliable. My left leg buckled first. I had a single moment of complete clarity in which I thought with strange calm, "Here it is," and then I was going down. I didn't hit the floor. Someone caught me. Hands. Firm, sure, the hands of someone who had caught people before and knew what to do with the weight. I was lowered rather than dropped, and by the time I registered what had happened I was sitting on the floor with my back against someone's knees and the tent had gone completely silent. The man who had caught me straightened up. He was in his mid-60s, silver-haired, in a dark suit with a pocket square that had gone slightly askew in the catching. He had the particular posture of someone accustomed to rooms listening to him, and he adjusted his jacket with the unhurried deliberateness of a person who understood that what he said next would be heard by everyone in the vicinity, and was choosing his words accordingly. He looked at my father. "I'm Dr. William Hayes," he said, "Chief of Staff at Memorial Regional. I've been Claire's physician for 6 years. I was a guest at this wedding tonight. Pause. I've reviewed her case file more times than I can count, and I think you need to hear what I found." My father stared at him. "Sit down, Mr. Maddox," Dr. Hayes said. Not unkindly. "This is going to take a moment. I won't reconstruct everything Dr. Hayes said that night, because some of it belongs to me and not to this story. But I'll tell you the shape of it." He explained fibromyalgia the way he'd once explained it to me. Not as a mystery or a controversy but as a well-documented neurological condition with peer-reviewed literature going back decades, with measurable abnormalities in central sensitization, with a patient population that skewed heavily toward people who had, in fact, spent years being told they were fine before receiving appropriate care. He said this calmly and without condescension. He said that what my family had just done, pressuring me to stand publicly questioning my diagnosis, the emotional distress of the scene itself, was a textbook trigger event for exactly the kind of collapse they had just witnessed. He said he had my medical file in his car. That he'd brought it because he was going to visit me at home the following week to review my treatment plan, and he'd meant to drop it off and now he was glad he had it. He said the words medical neglect and documented pattern of coercive pressure in the same sentence, quietly and clearly, and he watched my father's face while he said them. Aunt Linda left the tent. My mother sat down in the nearest chair and put her hand over her mouth. Priya was beside me. I don't know when she'd gotten there. She had my bag and my water bottle and her hand on my shoulder and she didn't say a single word. What happened at the wedding was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a different one. Dr. Hayes, in the weeks that followed, documented the incident formally. He had not planned to. But 2 things happened that changed his position. First, my father called the hospital and complained about Dr. Hayes's conduct at the wedding, claiming the doctor had interfered inappropriately in a family matter. Second, my Aunt Linda, who had left the tent but had not left the venue, had recorded part of what happened on her phone, including my collapse and Dr. Hayes's statement, and had sent the video to several family members with a caption suggesting the doctor had been rude and overstepped. Both actions had consequences they did not anticipate. The hospital's patient advocacy office contacted me. Not because of the complaint, but because the video had reached them through a circuitous route involving a family member of another hospital employee who had received Aunt Linda's forwarded message. The patient advocacy coordinator, a quiet, careful woman named Simone Wheeler, called me and asked if I was all right, and whether I wanted to discuss what had occurred. I said I did. What followed over the next 3 months was not something I orchestrated. I want to be clear about that. I did not set out to build a case. I did not call a lawyer. I did not strategize. What I did was respond carefully and honestly when institutions that had professional obligations to me asked questions. The hospital's internal review documented the incident. Dr. Hayes submitted a formal case note. Simone Wheeler, in the course of her advocacy work, identified that my file contained a documented history, in Dr. Hayes's notes going back 4 years, of family members contacting the hospital, questioning my diagnosis, and in 2 instances attempting to access my records without my consent. None of it had risen to formal action at the time. Now assembled together it told a story. My father had, 4 years earlier, called the hospital administration directly and suggested that my diagnosis was being sustained because I was a hospital employee and receiving preferential treatment. He had spoken to 3 different administrators. None of them had told me. Dr. Hayes had written a note after each call. My Aunt Linda had 2 years ago called the insurance company that covered my health plan and suggested that my claims should be reviewed for fraud. She had not told me this. I found out through the patient advocacy process, when the insurance company's records were subpoenaed as part of a formal inquiry. The insurance company had reviewed my claims. They had found no fraud. They had closed the inquiry and not contacted me. But the record of the call existed. Priya, when I told her this, was quietly and thoroughly furious in the specific way that very controlled people become furious. No raised voice, just a stillness that made the room feel smaller. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. "Apparently longer than I knew," I said. The hearing was held on a Tuesday in November, 3 months after the wedding. It was not a trial. I want to be precise about this. It was an administrative hearing before the State Medical Board's Patient Rights Division, convened because the documentary evidence assembled, Dr. Hayes's notes, the insurance inquiry records, the video of the wedding incident, the formal complaint my father had filed against Dr. Hayes, constituted a pattern that the board had determined required review. My father was there with a lawyer. Aunt Linda was there. My mother sat in the back of the room and did not look at me. Priya sat beside me. My colleague Dina Okafor had offered to come, and I told her it wasn't necessary, and she'd shown up anyway and sat in the second row. There was something about seeing her there in her good gray coat that made me feel steady in a way I hadn't expected. Dr. Hayes testified for 47 minutes. I know this because I watched the clock. Not out of impatience but because I was managing my pain, tracking time, doing the small arithmetic of endurance I'd learned over 8 years of living in a body that required careful accounting. He walked the board through my complete medical history. He explained the neurological basis of fibromyalgia in language precise enough for the board members who had medical backgrounds and clear enough for the ones who didn't. He presented the timeline of external pressure on my care, the calls to administration, the insurance inquiry, the documented pattern of dismissal he had observed during the few interactions he'd had with my family. He presented the video of the wedding incident with clinical precision, pausing it at specific frames to note my gait before the collapse, the moment of the fall, the triggering circumstances. He said, "Claire Maddox is one of the most engaged, methodical patients I have worked with in 31 years of medicine. She has maintained a symptom log for 8 years. She has never missed a scheduled appointment. She has followed every protocol modification I have recommended, often at significant personal cost to her professional and social life." He paused. "She has done all of this while the people closest to her told her the problem was her character. I find that remarkable. And I find the documented pattern of interference in her care to be something this board should take seriously." My father's lawyer cross-examined Dr. Hayes for 11 minutes. Dr. Hayes answered every question the same way he testified, directly, precisely, without defensiveness, with the particular authority of a man who had spent 3 decades being certain of what he knew and honest about what he didn't. The lawyer suggested that Dr. Hayes had overstepped at the wedding. Dr. Hayes said, "I was a physician who witnessed a patient with a documented condition collapse as a direct result of pressure applied by family members. I introduced myself and provided relevant medical context. I would do the same again." My father was asked to speak. He said again that he believed my diagnosis was not legitimate. He said he was my father and knew me better than any doctor could. He said he had spent years watching me use illness as a way to avoid responsibility. He said these things in the flat, certain voice of a man who believes them completely. That was the part that was hardest to hear. Not because it was new. I'd heard it for 8 years. But there's a difference between hearing something at a family dinner and hearing it stated formally, into a record, in a room where it will be weighed against what Dr. Hayes has just spent 47 minutes presenting. I heard my father speak and I understood, perhaps finally, that he was not performing cruelty. He genuinely believed what he said. He had constructed over years an internally consistent picture of me as someone who had given up and nothing, not my employment record, not my compliance with treatment, not the collapse at the wedding, not Dr. Hayes's testimony, would revise that picture because the picture wasn't built on evidence. It was built on fear. I don't say this to excuse him. What he did, what he and my aunt did, the calls, the insurance complaint, the years of public accusation, caused harm. Documented, measurable harm, not just to my emotional state but to my treatment environment, to my ability to trust that my medical information was secure, to the basic sense of safety that people with chronic illness depend on when they navigate systems that are already difficult. But I understood, sitting in that hearing room, that my father had watched me get sick and had not been able to accept it, and that his version of love was the refusal to accept it, and that this had become its own kind of damage separate from the original disease, accumulating alongside it for 8 years. Understanding it didn't fix anything. That's the part no one tells you. The board issued its findings 6 weeks later. My father and Aunt Linda received formal censure letters documenting the pattern of interference in my medical care. The insurance company was notified of the fraudulent inquiry Aunt Linda had initiated. The complaint against Dr. Hayes was dismissed entirely, with a note in the board's findings that his conduct at the wedding had been appropriate, professional, and potentially preventive of more serious medical harm. There was no arrest. I want to be clear about that too, because sometimes when I tell this story people expect a more dramatic ending. There were consequences, but they were the administrative and legal kind. Letters, records, notifications that would follow certain actions taken against a patient's documented medical care. My father did not go to jail. My aunt did not go to jail. My mother, who had not participated in the calls or the insurance complaint and who had sat in the back of the hearing room looking like someone watching a building fall, faced no formal consequences. What changed was smaller and more permanent. I sent my father a letter 3 days after the findings were issued. I'd written it over the course of 2 weeks, a dozen drafts, each one trying to find the balance between truth and the particular exhaustion of a person who has explained themselves too many times. The final version was 4 paragraphs. I told him I understood that he had loved me in the way he knew how to love me. I told him that his version of love had caused documented harm, and that the documentation existed now in a formal record that I had not sought but also would not apologize for. I told him I was not interested in reconciliation as a performance, in the kind of family peace that required me to absorb what had happened and produce forgiveness on a schedule that suited everyone else. I told him I would need time. I did not tell him how much. He called me twice in the 2 weeks after I sent the letter. I didn't answer. He left voicemails. In the first one his voice was tight and controlled, the voice of a man organizing his response. In the second one, I listened to it alone late at night sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. He sounded older than I'd ever heard him. He didn't say he believed me. He didn't say the word fibromyalgia. But he said, "I don't want to lose you," and he said it in the voice of someone who had finally understood that loss was a real possibility and not a negotiating position. I haven't called him back yet. That's where we are. Priya and I started taking a ceramics class in January. This was her idea, suggested with the particular strategy of someone who knows you need to do something with your hands and your attention that has nothing to do with pain or hearings or family or the accumulated weight of being disbelieved. We go on Thursday evenings. I'm not good at it. The clay doesn't cooperate with my hands on bad days, and on bad days I mostly sit beside the wheel and watch Priya make lopsided bowls with tremendous confidence. But on better days I make things. Small things. A bowl that actually holds its shape. A small cup with uneven walls that I gave to Dina, who put it on her desk and told everyone who asked that it was handmade by someone important. Dr. Hayes retired his small patient roster in March, which he had been planning for 2 years, and transferred my care to a specialist colleague of his, Dr. Anisha Nair, who called me before our first appointment to introduce herself and to tell me she'd reviewed my file in full. "You've done excellent work managing your own care," she said. "I'm looking forward to working with you." I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "Thank you. It's a small thing. But after 8 years of the opposite, small things accumulate." Rachel and Marcus sent me a card after the hearing, a handwritten note that said they were sorry the wedding had become something it wasn't supposed to be, and that they were glad I was okay, and that the video of Dr. Hayes' statement had made Marcus, who worked in healthcare administration, quietly furious in a way Rachel said she'd never seen before, and that they were in my corner always. I keep the card on my desk at work beside the lopsided cup. People ask me sometimes what I want others to take from this. They mean it kindly. They want a lesson, a resolution, a sentence that can be carried away and used somewhere else. I don't have one. Not a clean one. What I have is this: for 8 years I kept records. Not because I planned to use them. Not because I was building a case. I kept records because living with a condition that people don't believe in requires a kind of rigorous self-documentation. Symptom logs, medication records, appointment notes, just to maintain your own grip on what is real, when the people around you are constantly offering you an alternative reality in which you are the problem. The records saved me. Not just in the hearing room. Before that, and more quietly, they kept me tethered to what I actually knew about my own body, in the years when the people I loved most kept telling me I was wrong about myself. I don't know what will happen with my father. I think about calling him, and then I think about the voicemail, and I think about Rachel's wedding, and I think about the 4 years of documented calls to the hospital I didn't know about, and I wait. Not forever. But for now. The burning in my leg comes and goes. Some mornings I take my medication and sit on the edge of the bed and wait to find out what kind of day it will be. Some days Priya drives me and I work from home and the ceramics class is too much. Some days I walk the 4 blocks to the coffee shop and sit in the window and drink my tea and feel unremarkably fine. Both kinds of days are my life. I stopped apologizing for either of them. That took longer than it should have. But I got there.